We do expect a very strong number tomorrow, double what we saw in November, above 400,000 jobs created. But my message, and I think the warning to the street, is don't be distracted by the jobs numbers, the headline number. First of all, that's been a very noisy top line number. If you go back over 2021, a lot of revisions have been made to that number. I think the Fed and other market analysts are going to look at that top line number very skeptically. What really matters is the guts of it. It was just described, the labor force participation and the wage growth. We saw wage growth uptick. Are we going to see that again this time? Is that going to give the Fed more pause and tighten and do the tightening faster? So it's really about labor force participation. It's about wage growth. It's about those internal dynamics. And thankfully, we get to hear from the Fed chair just a few days after this when he testifies for his confirmation hearing next week at the Senate. It's rare to get that sort of almost immediate reaction absent an FOMC meeting. So that'll be interesting to see next Tuesday.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we'll be all over that story as well, Josh. But here's a question about, and I'm squarely focused on inflation and how wage inflation is going to feed that angle to the overall economic equation. We're looking at 4.1% on an average year-on-year average earnings, that is. How much of that changes if the labor participation rate expands? Because at the end of the day, there's a certain element of premiumization still happening. So yes, even if more people come back to the workforce, you would still want to pay them a certain price to stay motivated and stay in the game.
Well, exactly. And that's where that dynamic between the labor force participation rate and the wage growth has to come into play. But it's important to remember that this jobs report closes December 12th. So it's like looking at the light of a star that's somewhat old because it's all pre-Omicron impact in the US and around the world. We know if we go from December 15th, December 20th, over the holiday and now the past week, businesses are closing, schools been shut, which has affected childcare issues. So a lot of this has to be viewed with a kind of pre-Omicron lens. And that's why no matter what we see on the labor force participation, which we do think will increase, and the wage growth, which may stabilize a little, I think it's actually important to look at what Powell says this coming Tuesday and understand some of this data is old. And it's the inflation data, the PCE data and the CPI data happening later in the month that has now become the most important economic indicators in Washington and New York and around the world, no longer the jobs report.